Gamers, stop what you're doing. Do not summon on Aglaea, but maybe you should. It really just depends on your account, guys, how your account's looking, and how much you want to plan for the future. Because generally, guys, she's a DPS. While she is part of the new Remembrance class, we're probably going to get a lot of those characters in the upcoming patches of 3.x or whatever beyond, right? So, with her being the first character, I kind of think that she's kind of a bait type unit, personally and honestly, but she could still be really useful for your account, especially if you just started playing the game. I think she does offer a very specific niche, and I do think that her overall damage output could be better in a more general sense than someone like the Herda is. So that's what we're kind of going over today, guys, the pros, cons, everything like that, to see if you should really be summoning her for or not, or maybe just waiting for 3.1 and beyond. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and hop into it here, guys. These are kind of the main topics we're touching on right here today. Is the build is rough, basically going over everything you need for the build, because I do genuinely think that her build is rough in comparison to the other unit we currently have out, which is the Herda right now. Damage potential, just overall damage potential, which is something that needs to be touched on as well. This will include topics of like power creep and like how she gets her damage, stuff like that. And then finally 3.1 is near, or I guess I should put like 3.x is near. This is kind of going over like the future units and kind of predicting what maybe they could do and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and hop into it here, guys, with the build is rough. Okay, guys, then when I say rough, this is rougher than watching Joe Biden slip downstairs, guys. Okay, this is rough. Now, what do I mean by this? There's a couple different topics here that you can cover with this, right? So let's go ahead and start off number one at the team section here. Now, as far as teams goes, guys, the reason why I think teams are kind of rough to build is because realistically, guys, these are the main teammate options that she has to work with, right? Now, obviously, this has her on the list here, which, I mean, I guess you could technically mark her off the list here, but I mean, like, look at the options we currently have in the game. In terms of free-to-play options, first of all, right? We have Harmony MC over here, so that's 1. We have Hanya over here, that's 2. We have Asta over here, that's 3. We have Gallagher over here, that's 4. We have Hunt March 7th over here, that's 5. Then we have Tina over here, that's 6. Now, if we're talking about actual, like, really good usable options, while Hanya and Asta are usable, would I consider them, like, a best-in-slot? Or, like, could I really recommend using them on a team with her? I don't think they offer that much value to you. Now, the ones I think that offer the most value to you are things like Remembrance MC. I think they offer really good value to you. I think Hunt March 7th could actually be pretty decent as well, and Ting Yun as well for battery charge and stuff like that. Now, outside of those options, though, you see a lot of signature options here. Her best-in-slot options is going to be someone like this right here, which is Sunday, and then also you're going to be running like a Hua Hua or a Gallagher on the team as well, which having Gallagher as an option there is really nice. This does free up a lot of your other sustain characters for other teams as well, considering you can run him there, or Hua Hua, right? This is going to be her best in slot team, and this is using a lot of high value targets. Sunday, which doesn't have a rerun, if you're just starting 3.0, you can't get him anymore. Robin is going to be right next to her on the banner, so you're not only going to be having to pull for Robin, you're also going to be having to pull for her as well, so that's a lot of Jade spit in one patch there. And then, like I mentioned, Hua Hua doesn't have a rerun yet, probably gets a rerun soon, but that you can see where I'm going with this, right? You really want a healer that can maybe use Quid Pro Quo to get her energy back up. But the main point I want to kind of bring up here is actually the value of the free-to-play characters that you can actually run on a team with her, like Hanya, Asta. Really, do you get much value out of building these characters up? I really don't think so. For someone like the Herda, right, you can build up characters like Herda themselves, and they be really good on their own outside of using them on a team with the Herda. Like, you don't necessarily have to use them on a team with the Herda, and they still perform pretty decently in like pure fiction and stuff outside of that, right? And I think that's a very good option for you to run. The only character that really has value, but you still have to pull gacha for, is someone like Ting Yun here. I think Ting Yun offers a great amount of value here because she does give you energy regen. Over here, I'm going to put a pay-to-win team. I think her team can be pretty cost-heavy, especially if you're trying to get her up to a decent point, especially if you're putting her on par with like the Herda or something like that. I feel like that is where she kind of lacks at. But I do think that she can make up for that against the Herda and like just overall damage output against multiple different types of enemies. We'll get into that in a second here. So I do think teams are a bit pay to win. Now let's go into the relics. Now for the relics, realistically, guys, you do want to farm in a whole new setup. I mean, the same thing can be said about the Herda. Now this is not a versus video against the Herda. We'll be having a video out on that in a couple days. So if you want to see me go into more detail on that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can see that. But my biggest problem here, and I'm going to use one more comparison to the Herda here, the Herda gives themselves a lot of free stats, and what I mean by they give themselves a lot of free stats, she's giving herself 80% free crit damage, and Aglaea really doesn't do that, guys. Like, she gives herself a lot of boost on speed, which is nice, which ultimately affects the amount of attack she has, but like, attack is like the lowest damaging thing in your damage multiplier, so I mean, like, you kind of want those crit rate, crit damages. Those are like where stats are harder to get and stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong, she does give herself 12% crit rate here, but I think the crit rate and crit damage aspect here is going to be pretty hard to farm up, especially since it's not giving you a lot of free stats. Now, I will say, if you're running her on the best in slot team that she has, which, like I said, very pay to win there, very expensive in terms of value of that team as well, so you're putting a lot of valuable characters on one team, stacking a lot of valuable characters on one team. So with doing so, like, you're taking away from other teams now, but you're giving yourself a lot of crit rate or crit damage, I should say, with that team, right? Because if we take Sunday gives a lot of crit damage, and then also robbing gives a lot of crit damage as well, damage buff and stuff like that. So this can be alleviated. The crit damage anyways can be alleviated here with her best in slot team. But if you don't have that best in slot team, I do think getting the crit rate and crit damage is going to be a struggle there. That's only if you don't want to have the best in slot team, and that's why I say the build is kind of rough, especially for free-to-play players, because if you're running a free-to-play team, you probably don't have the best in slot unit, especially if you just started the game just now. This is going to be a major factor and a major role into getting this. I guess like the main concern would be the crit rate here and making sure you have enough crit rate for her to function off of, especially for free-to-play players. I just want to let this be known, guys. I think this does not matter at all if you have her best in slot team already. I think that her build is quite easy if you have her best in slot team. This is mainly just going over if you have a free-to-play team or not, because I do think that's where she kind of starts to lack at, whereas I think the Herta kind of stands on her own 2 feet, especially getting the increased damage bonus whenever you have like an extra erudition character on the team. Basically, it's a free like buff that your erudition character is giving to her if you run like someone like Herta, right? Now going over to the final thing here, which is light cones, which is honestly the most pressing issue. I feel like on top of all of these issues here, because I feel like, you know, character's pretty easy to get, relic's pretty easy to get, but the light cone issue is kind of hard, right? Because her best in slot is obviously her signature light cone. But what are the free-to-play options? What are the other alternative options you can run there? Realistically, guys, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. The options outside of that are kind of few and far between. But now Cryoless is probably gonna be the second best in slot option. This is a battle pass light cone, which requires you to spend money to get this light cone. The second best in slot option outside of this, and the third is going to be a gacha light cone that you get from the next patch as well. So I mean, like, all of these things kind of play together to like, what do you really do if you're a free-to-play character? What light cone do you really run? I mean, you could run the free-to-play light cone, but you're probably already running that on your Remembrance MC there. So, like, what real option do you have there? I think the really only option you have here, guys, is to really wait for 3.1. Like, this is kind of a waiting game, which is kind of suck ass for her, right? Like, I think 3.1 will introduce something that is going to be really good for her. So, 3.1 is going to be your option there, but that doesn't alleviate the option that you have in the game right now. Hey, gamers, stop 1 second here. A quick little addendum to this. Now, I know I said light cone really hard to build. There's few and far between options. There is one little adjustment I want to make here. I actually, for some reason, didn't even see that there was a 3-star light cone that you can run for her that gives her damage percentage. Now, while I do think that light cone is good, it does have really low base stats, which kind of fucks you in the ass. Secondly to that, I do think it's good in the aspect of your final attack, or I guess what you would be considering her ult damage is going to be pretty good, because whenever they leave the field, you do have to reset this buff and then build it back up. So that's at least 3 attacks you have to do with them to build it back up, I believe. So with that being said, I mean, I still feel like it's kind of weird to use it there. Just overall, though, that is another light cone option you can use here. Completely forgot about it. So the light cone option is not as bad as I said it was here. But now let's go ahead and talk about damage potential here, right? Because I think damage potential is also something super important. All right, let's go ahead and hop into how she gets her damage first. She is very self-contained, which is very good, right? Like, her damage is very self-contained. She gives herself a lot of speed, first of all, which the speed is going to be equal how much attack she has, which gives her a free stat there. That also means she doesn't need enemies, right? Like, the enemies don't really matter. Like, if we take like the Herta again, for example here, Herta really relies on you having a lot of enemies on the field. So if you don't have a lot of enemies on the field, you're having a lot harder time building up her stacks to get her increased damage off. So in those scenarios, I think that she's a lot better and more well-rounded in that sense, because she does still offer blast damage. She still offers a lot of actions on the field as well, or a lot of actionable hits that you can do with her. So she does work in like dual DPS teams and teams like Fei Zhao and stuff like that. So this is actually a really big pro for her, because you never have to rely on enemies. So if they ever drop like a certain MOC that only has 1 enemy, then you're not going to be scrambling around like you would be for like the Herta and just trying to build up those stacks before you use the enhanced skill attack, right? So very self-contained, really love that. That's how she's getting her damage, is everything from herself and from the team as well, right? So you're giving her crit damage, you're giving her speed, like everything relies on herself and her team versus her team, herself, and the enemy team as well, right? And also that plays into the future-proofing of her kit as well, because like I mentioned, what does she do? First of all, she has multiple hits, right? Or she has a summon on the team. So I mean, like a Memo Sprite, let's just put Memos right here. So this means she has a summonable person on the team, so that means any type of buffer we get in the future that buffs having Memo Sprites, she'll be active for that. So this is going to be playing really well with the characters we get in the future that play off of people with multiple different actions. Fei Zhao, for example, right? Fei Zhao can play as a nice sub DPS in this team because she doesn't require energy, so you can kind of feed all the energy into Aglaea herself, and then on top of this, you can kind of charge her ult up as well. Now, is this more of a benefit for the character that can play off of having the no energy and getting like their ultimate up from the hits per action? Yes, it is, but overall it still does work hand in hand with her too. They kind of work hand in hand with each other, so you can't really give you one without giving to the other as well. So in that sense, she's going to be very good for multiple different hits as well. Now, going into the future proofing here as well, one big detractor, I think this is to be said here, she's a DPS. She's going to get power creep like that, guys. Let's be honest, guys. With the amount of power creep we're getting in Honkai Star Rail, and honestly, I think 3.x or really 3.1, maybe it brings a DPS on par with what she can do. Like, I do think if we were to put her on the tier list right now, like if I were to give her like an actual tier rating, she's up here at tier 0. I don't think there's any doubt about that she is up here at tier 0. And that kind of leads me back to the last thing here, which is SP efficiency. SP efficiency is actually a very important thing. And the reason I say that, guys, is that's why people in a lot of different scenarios were using Jing Yuan as like an SP generator or as a sub DPS for teams way back in the day. Because basically what Jing Yuan would do, right, is Jing Yuan would just do a basic attack every single turn, generate SP for the team. LL would come in and do damage to the enemy because that's where the main source of your damage is from anyways. You get extra LL stacks from your ultimate and stuff like that. So LL would come in and do some pretty big damage, and he would act as a sub DPS. He would generate SP for the team. I think she can act in the same way. You summon Memo Sprite onto the field. Memo Sprite helps you do damage with basic attacks and enhanced basic attacks. And then what do you get from this? You don't have to use any skill points, which means she can be run as a sub DPS if you had an SP soul sucking DPS. So someone like Fei Zhao, for example, like that's the best example I can give you guys is Fei Zhao here, right? Because Fei Zhao is literally just that SP soul sucker that you already have in your team. She literally has to use a skill just about every single turn. So this means you can actually kind of pair her up with the characters that kind of have like the same motif of damage. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that all these characters work super well there. They just kind of have the same damage motif as she has, right? Like crit rate, crit damage is very effective for them. They use more SP more often. So like Jing Liu, Jing Yuan, like you want to use skill with him every turn. Like none of these are like best in slot by any means. I think Fei Zhao works really well there. Maybe Boohill too. Like they all use a lot of SP. So with her being pretty SP efficient, in my opinion, I think that you could probably honestly get away with running another one of these characters here as like a sub DPS and or a main DPS alongside of her, and you can maybe run her in dual DPS teams, right? Now I'm not gonna say they're the perfect team, right? I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying for future units, these characters that want to use more SP and have the same damage motif that she does, she works really well there too. Now, the final point that I want to get to, guys, is actually going to be 3.1 is gear. And guys, as far as 3.0 is concerned, we already know we'll probably get another Remembrance character. This is kind of a bait character, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, because I do think we'll get a lot stronger Remembrance character, probably by like, I don't even know, maybe 3.2, 3.3. We'll see probably a power creep in her by that time, if I had to guess. But let's go ahead and talk about 3.1, because we already know we're getting Tribbie there, right? Which is going to be, what, a quantum support character, right? So we already have that there, and we already know how strong fucking support characters are. We can take a look at that in a second here. And then finally, what we have Medi here, which is Imaginary and Destruction, which Destruction has a really good track record for just being fucking good. So, I mean, like, you have both of those things there. Now, let's go ahead and kind of talk about this, right? Tribbie is a quantum imaginary support. Hopefully, I'm not tripping out the order here, because I think this is the order that came out here. I think Bronya obviously came out when the game first came out. The next 5-star support we had was Ruan Mei, which is AoE. Number 3 was Sparkle, which is very single target oriented. Number 4 is AoE, which is Robin. Number 5 was very single target oriented, which is Sunday, which leads me to believe number 6 here is also going to be very AoE oriented. And if we take a look at our AoE oriented characters we have in so far, just like base this off of like the characters we have that are AoE oriented, even Harmony Trailblazer is AoE, and look how good they were when they came out, right? I honestly think, guys, Tribbie will probably be up here with them on this tier list just from the fact that she is AoE based. From what we've seen in terms of Harmony characters, have been tier 0 and have been tier 0 for a long time. I don't know necessarily what Tribbie's gonna do, right? And maybe Tribbie won't be as strong as these two characters here, but that being said, from the trend that we currently have in the game, Tribbie's probably gonna be pretty strong, and is probably gonna be pretty strong for a plethora of people on your team versus your DPS here, which is probably gonna be power crept in a couple of patches anyways. So we're gonna put here, guys, probably T0 for a while. Next is gonna be Medi here. Now, the reason I want to bring up Medi here, right, guys, is because Medi is an imaginary destruction type unit, and if you take a look at any of the destruction characters we have, right, Firefly was tier 0 at one point. I mean, all of these characters here that we've got in the destruction have been up there at one point, and honestly, I feel like every single destruction character we've gotten has changed the meta in some way. Like, think about all of the destruction characters we've ever gotten released and how strong they were at release. Now, power creep does play a pretty big role, but I think the power creep overall has affected our destruction characters less than they have some of our other characters. Let's take Inhility, for example, right? Inhility got hit hard, brother. Look at all these characters. They got sent to the goddamn Shadow Realm after that, right? I feel like overall, the biggest impacting characters we have been destruction characters, and I feel like that's going to be the same for Medi as well. Destruction has always been like tippity top, bro, so I think you can kind of always bet on what destruction is going to be there as well in terms of like for future proofing and everything like that. Now obviously I could be coping and just reminiscing on the old days of HSR from that, but I do think destruction does show a pretty positive sign, and destruction characters have always been broken as fuck at release, right? But I do want to mention one major pro here, guys. If you're kind of questioning yourself on whether you want to pull it or not, right, even the slightest bit of questioning, because you don't know what either of these two characters do, you don't look at leaks or anything like that, and you want to know exactly what they do, right? Luckily for you, she comes out on part 2. She is a part 2 unit, right? So this means you can wait for the live stream, the 3.1 live, guys. The 3.0 live will go into detail on what these characters do so you can get a better grasp on how those characters work. Now, if you're a waifu collector, you don't give a shit about Medi. If you're a waifu collector, you don't give a shit about Tribbie because you're collecting waifus. And then, if anything, yeah, Aglaea here would be the waifu that you would choose, obviously, guys. But yeah, overall, guys, I think you do have a really big advantage in the 3.1 live stream to see what's coming out. Also, you're going to have the advantage of drip marketing as well. I always think having units on part 2 is the best time that you can be smart with a banner, because part 1 usually you don't know what's coming out next, other than like you know that Tribbie and Medi are coming out, but you don't know like what they're going to do or anything like that unless you look at leaks and stuff like that. But like part 2 is really good. You can be really smart with this, and I think honestly you probably should just be smart with it, right? Just wait for her to come out. Wait for the guide testers to come out and say, hey, she's really good, or hey, she's really bad, or look at the damage numbers she's able to do, look at the scenarios she's put in and how good she does there, right? I think that is the best approach to this, guys. Literally, I think just wait. Just wait. Be patient. Don't pull her on launch. I don't think you have to, because we're going to have the 3.1 live stream, like I mentioned. And we're also going to have drip marketing as well for 3.2. So, I mean, like, you have a lot of... You're going to have potentially 4 different characters you're going to know upcoming before you actually have to pull for her and she goes away, right? So, overall, guys, those are my gripes with her. Those are my pros with her, right? Let me know your pros. Let me know your cons in the comment section down below. I get a lot of dislikes because people don't agree with me and it's called me dumb as fuck for these takes, right? This is genuinely what I think the character is going to be like. If you don't agree with me, then you don't agree with me. Whatever, guys. This is just what I see. Take it for what you will. Anyways, guys, you'll probably shoot them in the comment section down below. That's what you normally do. Anyways, guys, see you later. Subscribe if you haven't already, and bye.